All right, hello and welcome back. Kobe Orange Friday on a Friday. You know what that means. Ryan Schumpert, Ethan Stone, Rocky Top Insider, Saturday Down South. We're all fired up because it is football time in Tennessee. We're not going to talk about anything that happened over the last 4 or 5 months of our time. We're going to move right on past whatever Tennessee athletics was up to over the last. No, we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna hash it out because it was a lot of our time, and that is what we're gonna have to do. Ryan, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Glad to be back in Tennessee soil, and glad to have a little bit of a slow period, I guess, for the next couple weeks until head to Nashville for SEC Media Days. And like you said, then I'm trying not to think about it being football time in Tennessee yet. I'm like, give me at least a week to reprocess. But yeah, I mean, that's what's next for sure.
I didn't realize it was in Nashville this year. It's not in Atlanta.
Yeah, it was, I think, originally supposed to be here in 2020. And then obviously didn't happen because of COVID. So this is the year that they pushed it back to.
Ethan Stone also here, Saturday Down South. Are you coming up to Nashville for SEC Media Days? It's, it's in your company name, Saturday Down South. You got the SEC, like y'all are the SEC blog. Are you coming up too?
Yeah, I will not. They send people far more important than me to go.
If they're sending Chris Marler and not Ethan Stone. Don't let them send Chris Marler, Connor O'Gara, friend of the pod. If you hear this, what are we doing? Ethan Stone gets precedent.
Both of them, but no, I'll be sticking around the news desk, helping out there. Obviously, there'll be a lot of coverage for it, and it's getting closer than we think. When Ryan said it, I was like, oh yeah, we're two months away here. So, I'm doing well. I'm doing really well. I've moved in. This is my office. You can't see. It's kind of weirdly placed because this is just like my street behind me. Everything is in front of me. I'm like facing my room. So I have a bit of a weird background for podcasts here. But I finally moved in, getting settled here and ready to talk some baseball, some football recruiting.
There you go. Ryan, how excited are you to not have to deal with my DMs for at least 9 months? Baseball DMs, that is.
So excited. So excited. I mean, I could tell it was getting to the nth degree of annoyance when this week, I would say 60% of your DMs I actually agreed with, the general premise of them, but just your tone in which you discussed it and the past build up from really just the last 2 weeks. I mean, kind of the whole season. It was really when I think of what annoyed me for the Chase DMs this year, I will think about the first weekend of the year when you were just frantically panicking like the SpongeBob meme with everything on fire, and then the last 2 weeks. And then this week I kind of agreed with most of what you said, but I was already just on high edge from your messages that I was ready to snap on you at this first sign of irritation.
Fair. But also,
off to a good start.
I ended up being totally redeemed here. Where what I saw in the original, I'm going to give, Brian's going to pop a blood vessel on this podcast, where the Grand Canyon and Arizona series told us everything that we needed to know about this team, where it was pitching's going to be solid, we're going to be a pitch first team, and this lineup is really going to suck for the majority of this year. This lineup is going to be tough to get through. And it was funny, on the broadcast where they're talking about Griffin Merritt a lot, and he was actually figuring out not even through the long ball, just finding the gaps. He just was a single machine. But it was it was something where you discounted. It's well, he was gone. He was just benched. He was out of the lineup for what was it, 2-3 weeks at one point this year? How long was he?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't completely out of it. I mean, he started a game every SEC series, but there was a 2-3 week stretch where it was one start and then maybe a pinch hit at bat in there too.
And he's batting cleanup, and then he's in the heart of the order. I mean, Christian Moore had his ups and downs. We talk about the defensive issues early on this year, and that was evident in those series where it was oh, this is this is gonna be tough. And obviously, part of it, Maui Ahuna, not starting out with the team, that was tough with all the mess that was going on there. They went through all kinds of stuff. And Ryan, I'm gonna leave it to you to start things off because you wrote a piece about this team, and I think part of why this team in baseball frustrates me more than the other two. I read about this last year where we spend more time with Tennessee baseball than we do Tennessee football and basketball, and it's not even close. The amount of hours that I've spent watching Tennessee baseball versus football and basketball, it's not even close. So I think that's probably why more of my frustrated fan brain pops up more for Tennessee baseball, is because I have more time to think about it and I spend more time being, and also what I do believe this in my heart of hearts, because the Atlanta Braves are a long ball machine and have been for years now and are just good. When you are a fan of like two very, very different ball clubs and you go back and forth and you're like, I just want to poke the Tennessee offense with a stick and like do something when I'm watching. I'm like, Matt Olson just hit another 700-foot home run, and we've got Griffin Merritt, who's got like just the gigantic Scott Steiner arms, and it's never going deep. We're never going deep. And then Omaha being what it is, bring in the fences. I don't know what we're doing in Omaha, but we need to do it. Like, this is kind of silly that we're not bringing in the fences. So if no one's hitting home runs, hey, we need to redo this whole idea, because you know what's cool? Home runs. You know what I like seeing? Home runs. That's a cool thing. That's what people like seeing, actually. So now I'm just ranting. Ryan, you wrote this piece about it. What was your final big takeaway here? I'm feeling good. I'm just unloading all of my frustrations here.
Yeah, I guess I'll respond to two things first at the end before kind of answering your question. I do think, I don't disagree about like the ballpark being maybe a little too big. The wind was blowing in like all week, so I think that definitely had like a huge factor on it. I think there were probably 4 balls in that Tennessee LSU game, the second game on whatever that was, Tuesday night, that would have gone out if the wind wasn't blowing in. And Griffin Merritt, never hit home runs besides the 18 home runs that he hit this season. But hold on,
I am saying in Omaha, and I'm saying what he was later on. Did he hit one in the Supers? He didn't hit one in the Supers. He didn't.
No, he hit one in the. He was singles on from Supers and
that's what I was saying. That wasn't even. Okay. I was happy with Griffin. I'm not even taking. No.
Okay, okay. Misinterpreted what you said.
Yeah,
my apologies.
This is a pro Griffin Merritt podcast. He fought through it. I'm a pro Griffin Merritt guy.
Okay, but yeah, I guess to your point is. Now, I think the thing that stuck with me the most, writing that article yesterday, was just, rethinking about early in the season, and not even the defensive mistakes and the offensive limitations or the starting pitching not living up to it early in the season. It was the fact that it felt like every time the first 2 months of the season, Tennessee faced any adversity, they folded. Bad weather, bad inning, Maui Ahuna suspended. Anything that hit a tough break in a game, they just collapsed. They folded. They didn't have any sort of resiliency. And then when I go back and, obviously I think you can look at the fact that they turned 5-10 into 16-14. That's kind of the start of it. They overcame blowing a game badly at South Carolina, game 1 of a doubleheader, and turned around and just kicked the crap out of South Carolina in game 2. And then in the postseason, they went from bad SEC tournament. They got a really tough draw. I don't know if bad draw, but a tough draw in the regional, down to their last strike multiple times, down by multiple runs, give up the lead in the bottom of the ninth, win in 14 innings, have to go to Hattiesburg instead of host, delays, down by 4 runs in an elimination game, down by 4 runs in Omaha in an elimination game. They just answered the bell and responded to adversity and seemed unfazed by it the last 6 weeks of the season. And that was just such a 180 from what we saw the rest of the season. And I think and obviously, I said in that story that, 50 games I watched them in person, that was not hyperbolic, going through, that was the number of games I covered in person this year, and, watched just about all of them. And just being close to it, obviously, and that in tune, it kind of changes my perspective a little bit, but finding a lot of those guys likable and just seeing that growth as a whole from a team, I felt was really, really cool. And I felt was one of the things that people should, at least I think people do, and certainly myself, love about sports is kind of seeing a team come together and change radically. And you look at the very mental things of things, which I think can very easily be the most likable or dislikable thing about a team, is how they respond mentally. And to see one go from responding really, really horribly early in the season to really, really well late in the season, and to me, probably slightly overachieve from the talent level, it was pretty cool to watch.
Ethan, were your takeaways pretty similar, or what was your strongest takeaway that you're gonna think back on about this 2023 Tennessee baseball run?
Yeah, mine was going to be exactly the same as Ryan, so I'll just kind of expand it. Just, I guess, This season from Tennessee, especially if you're a Tennessee fan, I think should give you some perspective into what college baseball is really turning into, like just how fun it is. I mean, take me as an example. 2 years ago, I wasn't into college baseball, just not at all. And you start watching this Tennessee team of last year that's hitting long bombs all over the place, and number one the entire country, and then they fall before Omaha. And then you see this team who give what Ryan just explained with everything, 5-10 to where they were now, to making it to Omaha, to being down to their last strike, to still beating Clemson, still going through the super regional round and making it to Omaha, doing something that last year's team didn't do, as a team that lost to Grand Canyon to start the season, as you would say, Chase, that had a rough start to the season, was able to turn it around. And that's their story, is they went from where they should not have been to a top 5 finish in the country, top 6 finish in the country, if you want to be, if you want to play that game. But it's just fun. I mean, you look at what Ole Miss did a few years ago. They were like one of the last teams in the field, and they won the whole thing. You have those smaller teams where they get into the field and you say, I mean, I don't think really anyone expected Tennessee to go to 5th in the nation when they even entered Omaha. I mean, they were playing well at that point. They had just won a series against South Carolina. They were playing well to end the season. But, I mean, you still don't necessarily think, hey, that team is playing well enough right now to make it all the way, because it's so tough to make it to Omaha. And so these past couple of weeks, if you're watching Tennessee baseball, not weeks, months, I guess, if you're watching Tennessee baseball and you see them transform like this, I mean, there's little stories around like that all around the country. But what Tennessee did this season to be able to turn it around and be like that, that's the jewel. That's the jewel of it all. And so if you're following this Tennessee team, if you're following teams like it, you'll kind of really come to appreciate, I guess, what college baseball had to offer. I think it was Vitello the other day that said, and just look at the talent that's in this room right now, or in the field right now. You got Dylan Cruz, who's going to be incredible. You got, Trey Morgan's going to be incredible. The top of LSU's lineup is absurd. It is just completely unfair. And then you got Paul Skeens, who is essentially Nolan Ryan on the mound the other day. I mean, Tennessee couldn't touch him. And then you got Chase Dollinger. I could just continue naming names all day. But the amount of talent that college baseball is seeing right now, and just the growth of it in general, it's just cool to see. It's cool to see from someone that hadn't respected it, I guess, as much as I had a couple of years ago.
It's also harder to watch. Like, they're getting better and better about their TV. Like, they've got to fix the broadcast and making it more available to folks. That's a big part of it. But I do think the sport's growing more and more each year. But I think it speaks to, like, I understand, like, this was fun, and this is something I think I DM'd in the group chat too, was just that, like, there's a reason, like, Mississippi State hasn't even sniffed a College World Series since winning it 2 years ago. Obviously, a gigantic park. They've invested heavily in college baseball. It's a big college baseball university. 2 years now removed, and they're not even anywhere near it. Tennessee, obviously, they're number 1 in 2024 recruiting. That's good. That's cool. There's no guarantees. And I think what I struggle with down the stretch here was, like, I think I even told my dad, I was like, this would be the most Tennessee thing ever to, like, go the furthest with, like, the least talented team. And I said in the group chat where I was like, Drew Beam, like, Chase Burns obviously being electric and doing what he did was awesome. And that was probably the highlight for me, is Chase Burns going them out and just not, like, his intensity and him just, like, going full John Rocker, just absolute flamethrower, losing his mind after getting out of high pressure.
Hopefully not completely John Rocker.
Yes, off the field. Yeah, I'm saying on the field, just like the purely, let me specify, purely on the field of just throwing heat and just embracing, just throwing stuff where they were like, you can't touch him. And he knew that you couldn't touch him. I think for me, it's just, it's going to be hard. Like last year's team, maybe the best college baseball team we'll ever see at the University of Tennessee. Like, it's going to be really hard to ever get back to where that was. To not even get to the College World Series for that group last year, and then to get to the Final Five, to be pretty close. Like, you had a bullpen game against LSU. Like, that was, we talked about where it's like you get to avoid Wake and you get a bullpen game. Like, that's the best case scenario. No Paul Skeens. Like, Tennessee was favored. People are probably going to forget that. Tennessee was favored in this game. Like, this was a bad way to go out. Like, this was a bad, unfortunate way to go out because you had it right there. And when you get to that point, you just kind of want to, you're just like, all right, we're here, and you want to lose in a different way. And I understand that you can't do this, but like, to get shut out, to not be able to touch LSU in a bullpen game, to see so many guys left on base all over again, those same kind of horrors that we saw throughout the year where it's like they just could not piece it together offensively. They could not figure out the right lineup. Tony Vitello changed the lineup so many times and who was batting where so many times through the year. Last year, it was just 1 through 9. We knew exactly who was starting. We knew it was just a well-oiled machine there. This year, the pitching was so good. Like, Drew Beam got better. Drew Beam was just unbelievable down the stretch for Tennessee. Like, you could make the case, and I think it's pretty clear, Doe was the worst of the three, and he came into the year, I mean, your ace, like, you thought he was going to be the best pitcher in the country. Like, that's a huge testament to Frank Anderson and what they built. Like, that pitching staff where Doe was the weak link in the rotation and the one we were all most nervous about week in, week out, that's pretty crazy. And that was because Andrew Lindsay was a huge hit. Like, that was a great transfer portal win. Chase Burns sticking with it and not folding by getting removed from the rotation and just becoming a huge cog, huge win. Camden Sewell just being awesome, and his reaction after, like, just nothing but the best for Camden Sewell. Going forward, AJ Russell, absolutely electric. Going to him in tight spots, and he comes through in a big way. Like, it just, there were so many positives in the rotation and where they were and where they were going, that you're like, could Tennessee ever have a rotation that strong again, and a bullpen that strong where you really trusted so many dudes up and down that group? The offense just wasn't all the way there. It was Hunter Inslee with one of the worst at bats we've seen in a long time. Like, it was just one of those where you're like, that can't happen. Like, it was that was rough. Christian Scott going in there where he was just devastated every time he went to the plate, where he knew he was in a hole, he knew he was struggling, and you're like, okay. He was great in SEC play, long time ball, but like, the moment was too big for him. Like, it was just, he was not going to be he was not going to give you what you needed down the stretch. Cal Stark, who great defensively, as we talked about, like, Cal Stark was important defensively and stopped the just guy stealing second automatically on this Tennessee team and putting them in bind, especially with like Chase Burns on the mound with his high leg kick and everything. There was something about it where you're like, this is so frustrating because his pitching is so good. We're keeping this Tennessee team in every game. And I imagine it had to be frustrating for a lot of these pitchers to be like, I only gave up 2 over 6 or 7, and I still think that's not even close to being enough. Or that I have to always be looking over my shoulder because our offense was just not anywhere close. And you're watching these other games, and I'd never fully bought in to this group. Maui was so streaky. Maui really came through down the stretch, but Maui low and away, off speed, low and away. He couldn't lay off, and that was a struggle throughout. Hunter, it's like Hunter is like the ultimate godfather. Just when I thought I was out, you brought me back in. Where I was like, all right, I'm kind of going out on Hunter. All right, he brought me back in. Jared Dickey, probably the most consistent of the bunch, where you're like, you just wish he could be up to bat more. Christian Moore, obviously saving the Vols. Like, they don't even get here without his regional play. Like, an unbelievable run in regionals. It's important that he's back next year. But you look through it, and I think Tennessee's offense, and I'm curious what Tony would say about this, you would have guessed at least somebody would have been as good or stepped up to what we saw last year, right? Like, they had to replace 8 of 9 guys, and all 8 didn't get up to where the previous player was last year. Is that fair, Ryan, to be like, no one was actually better than from last year's group in that new spot?
I mean, Jared Dickey was better than Seth Stevenson, but that was also your best player.
Well, I'm counting Jared Dickey as a player last year, yeah, and he was before the injuries. I would say he's one of the 9 from last year. Okay. I wouldn't count him.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and obviously he didn't play left field. I would say, and again, I'm not a huge Seth Stevenson guy. I would say Griffin Merritt was better than Seth Stevenson. Okay, and I would say there's a case to be made either way, but I would take Maui over Cortland Lawson. But
would you really?
Yeah, I mean, I thought. See, you said Maui was inconsistent. I don't really think that was true. Now, to me, Maui, and I don't blame people for this, there was just such a disconnect, in my opinion, from how the fans viewed Maui to how I viewed Maui. I mean, don't get me wrong, he wasn't a prototypical leadoff guy. He struck out way too much, which is why I never liked him there to begin with. I mean, you could tell that was going to be the case in the fall. And I think what really is the one, and I might have said this on here last week, I've said this somewhere, so forgive me if I did, but he's got, I don't think his game as a whole is a whole lot like Javi Baez, but he's got this Javi Baez ability to about once a series strike out and just, you're like, that's the worst at bat I've ever watched in my entire life. And I feel like fans just like took that and was like, this guy's terrible. He was like even when stretching the season, he wasn't great. He was just a one for four machine. He would just go 1 for 4, 1 for 4, 1 for 4. And then I felt like down the stretch of the season, I mean, you said it. He was really good in Omaha. He was really good, or at least better in the Hattiesburg Super Regional, really good in Game 3. You know, he didn't have quite as much power, home run power that I expected. But to me, he was a guy that I thought was good. And then once they were able to find some treatment that, made his back feel better. I mean, you look to me really right from kind of where Tennessee started to turn the season around for that Vanderbilt series on. I thought he was really, really good defensively. And, I don't know, maybe some people just had the early season struggles he had defensively in their head. But I thought he was a lot better than kind of the public perception of him is.
Yeah, and I mean, Zane was clutch, and we'll see what happens with Zane going into next year. But, I mean, Trey Lipscomb came in. No one knew who Trey Lipscomb was before last year. He sat and waited, and then Trey Lipscomb was unbelievable in the 5-hole. Zane was nowhere close to what Trey was last year. And Zane was clutch. Like I said, like we're just looking at the full body of work where I think Tony and this Vols team needed a couple of these guys to hit. Even with how good the rotation was, they needed a couple of them to be like all-star, really, really good players to kind of get somewhere close to where they were a year ago. And Simo was good, but Simo was not better than Jarrell Ortega last year. Like Jarrell, I think it might be the most overlooked Tennessee player from last year.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Like he was unbelievable. I think people don't understand how good Jarrell was last year. So I think Simo was a downgrade. Now next year, year 3, I could see like we've seen the flashes now that it wouldn't surprise me if we can get past him. But this year he was not. Luke Lipsius, I would still take over Griffin Merritt from this year and the DH
Blake
spot.
Burke, you mean?
Or Blake Burke, yeah. Excuse me. I would take him over Blake Burke. Like Blake Burke might be. Would you be mad if he entered the portal? With Blake Burke being gone, would that upset you, Ryan? Would that be like, oof?
Yeah, I think it would upset me, and I don't think he's going to enter the portal for what it's worth. But I think it would upset me more from the fact that Tennessee already just has needs in the portal and adding another, because there's not, unless Kavaris Tears can get a lot better defensively at first base and they can teach him to do that. I mean, he's been in outfield all this year, but he spent some time there first base. Like, that's going to be a spot. There's no one else on the roster that can start there.
That is actually kind of interesting, though, if Tears spent all offseason at first. Like,
I just planted something in Chase's mind. I'm not sure I should have. But no, I mean, I get your
Tony,
point.
let's talk.
I get your point about Blake Burke and that the productivity was certainly not there. And
I mean, he was.
I think we're going to get to it in a second, but he was definitely one of the biggest disappointments of the season.
Who, Ethan, in your estimation, who was the biggest surprise for you? Who was, or what was the biggest surprise about this team? It could be a broad question or a player specifically.
Oh my goodness. Probably Andrew Lindsay. I don't know if I'm going to go with that answer. Actually, let me think.
That's a good answer.
There's like 4 of them that came to mind, and that was
it's either him or Zane Denton. I don't know. I'm going to be straight up with you. I haven't watched enough Tennessee baseball to know enough to give a solid answer on that. But Andrew Lindsay would probably be my answer, just because he's not a guy for a fan like me. Or not a fan like me, for an outside viewer like me. He's not exactly a guy that I saw giving as much to Tennessee as he did this season. I mean, you just assume it's going to be Beam, Burns, and Dollander, and that's just going to kind of be how it is. But with Burns, I feel like not struggling, but needing the move kind of to the bullpen. I feel like that's just a – sorry, you guys were kind of frozen there for a second. I feel like that it was more important for Burns, I feel like, than Beam, than for Lindsay. But I feel like just having him in that spot to have a guy to just further the rotation that was already as dangerous as it was, especially with the hitting concerns that Chase and Ryan have kind of laid out. I don't know. You feel like that's a huge thing. And then I mean, obviously moving into the postseason rounds, you have him doing what he was doing there. I'm going to kind of switch and do a two-parter because Zane Denton, I feel like also just his run in the postseason. And I mean, you forget how many clutch moments he had, not just against Clemson, but just, I mean, all over the place. The dude was hitting home runs when Tennessee needed it left and right. I mean, I remember at one point in the group chat, I was like, unironically, build the man a statue. It's like, unironically, the guy's like keeping us going here at times, especially when the offense was. I remember in that Clemson game, Zane Denton was the only guy that showed up for like 3 innings, a solid 3 innings. Obviously, it's the one to have Tennessee in that place in the first place. I think I'm going to go ahead and switch my answer. I'm going to say it's Zane Denton. I'm just because of his postseason run alone, I'm going to say it's Zane Denton. That surprised me the most because I remember writing about his initial transfer from Alabama for SDS. It was one of the first pieces I did actually back when I was starting there as a freelancer. And I remember Zane Denton, I was looking into him and stuff like that. And I mean, he just wasn't an uber impressive guy. You come to Tennessee, it's not like he was, Darrell Ortega or anything like that. It's not like he was incredibly impressive the entire season, but just his ability to turn it on as we're moving into the later parts of the year, into the summer months and into Omaha. It's just what Tennessee needed. It's the type of spark that you need if you're going to have guys that are not performing to the level that the 2022 team did.
Ryan, what about you? Who is your biggest surprise?
I think on the positive side, it would be Andrew Lindsey, just the way he stabilized things when they really needed it to be stabilized. But Ethan, he hit on the most of the important stuff there. And they're really, I mean, it's funny because looking at the rundown, you had to ask the question. There were like so many that came to mind, and I don't think it necessarily that had necessarily hit me. That so many things were different, and typically things are different in a baseball season. It's harder to project even from watching them scrimmage, half a dozen times or more in the fall. I think another one, and you could argue whether it's on the positive side or not, but Hunter Inslee and Christian Scott starting in the outfield for Tennessee. I mean, I remember Jack and I did our preseason podcast, and we probably mentioned 30 dudes on the active roster. We didn't mention Hunter Inslee, and Christian Scott was mentioned as an afterthought of a guy that will get opportunities in the outfield, but it's not going to win the job. And obviously, there's plenty of negative things you can say about how they performed in the NCAA tournament, especially Scott, who really struggled. But I think it's easy to look past just the way those guys stabilized Tennessee in that second half of the season and their consistency. I mean, they were 2 of Tennessee's 3 or 4 best hitters in SEC play. And I don't think, I think you can make a point that speaks to Tennessee's offense not being as potent as it needed to be. And I would agree with that. But I would also say those guys got, especially Scott, and Inslee, I don't want to put a cap on his ceiling, but those guys got just about everything they got out of their potential at a time Tennessee really needed it. And then on the negative side, one, I think there's 3 to come to mind, which is Blake Burke, Chase Dolander, and the fact that no left-handed pitcher ever stepped up out of the bullpen to be able to help them. And I do think injuries played a role there. If you told me Wyatt Evans wasn't going to get the pitch this season, that would be less of a surprise to me. He's their best left-handed arm. From watching him in the fall, from talking to people in the program, he would have pitched major innings for this team this year. But
so what happened to Wyatt?
Just arm soreness, arm tightness, and then it was going to be by the time he would work his way back, have a setback, and then I think it was probably late April that he was throwing some bullpens again, but they just decided, all right, let's just use a redshirt year and shut him down. But I think when you look at, what we've talked about Tennessee's team, it's got to be Blake Burke. I think you can argue Chase Dolander was probably more surprising to me. But to your point, Tennessee's starting staff and pitching was still really, really good. Like, they overcame Chase Dolander not being 2022 Chase Dolander. They needed dudes. They had a lot of solid guys in the lineup this year. They didn't have a lot of dudes. And obviously they had a ton of dudes last year. And I think the guy that all of us pointed to, this guy's a dude and he's going to be really good, is Blake Burke. And the question was, and I pointed this out. I wasn't, just crowning him, but I was like, will he be able to be just as effective now when he's the guy in the middle of an SEC lineup and people can pitch around him and people can attack him in different ways and they got more data on him. And he was, for all intents and purposes, a non-factor for most of the season. And I give him a lot of credit. He had a huge hit in Super Regional. I thought he was really good in Omaha. His approach, his ability. I mean, I hadn't hardly seen him go. He went the other way more times in Omaha than he did the rest of the season combined, it felt like.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a really positive sign going forward. But he was the guy that it felt like Tennessee just, besides Dickey was consistent outside of maybe the 2 weeks after he came back from that shoulder surgery. He was consistently really good. But outside of Lindsey Nelson Stadium, he's just not a huge power hitter. His power, is a little bit limited. Blake Burke was that guy that needed to be a consistent power. And not even was he not that. He was, for the majority of SEC play, he was consistently one of Tennessee's worst hitters.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably Tony kept him in the middle of the lineup too long for a lot. Like, it was just one of those where this is not getting fixed mid-year. Where I think you and I have talked about it, where it's like his whole offseason needs to be just low and away, off-speed stuff. Like, I don't know. It completely changes his ceiling, Ethan. Like, it just completely, like, if that's his ceiling, what we saw this year with more data and teams knowing how to attack him, it's like he's a 7, 8, 9 guy, like, in this lineup. And that changes.
That's not his ceiling, though.
Well, no, I'm saying that might be. Like, what if that is what he is at Tennessee?
That's what I'm telling you. I'm telling you you're wrong. That's not his ceiling.
Okay.
That's what I'm telling you.
Okay.
I mean, everything you said is right. What he is this year was a 7 and 8 hitter, and Tony should have made the move earlier. I completely agree with all of that. But I would fight back against the thought that was by any means his ceiling.
What is the biggest portal need or needs, plural, for this team this offseason? Where do they attack, and where do they look to jumpstart this offense going into next year?
I think the Zane Denton question is a big one, whether he comes back or not. But I think it probably starts with the left side of the infield.
Do you think he comes back?
I would lean towards no, but I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility either. And it's funny because obviously he was an Alabama third baseman, but I think Tennessee's going to target another Alabama third baseman. I think is better than Zane Denton. Hard. Colby Shelton, stud for Alabama as a freshman this year, hit 20-plus home runs.
20-plus home runs in Alabama. Put him in Lindsey Nelson. Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, so I think the left side of the infield, shortstop for sure. I think they're going to add somebody. Third base is kind of up in the air. And then, what I just talked about, left-handed pitching. I think they need to add – they will look to add at least one arm there, if not two. They lost out on the Justin Lower kid from Xavier who committed to LSU over Tennessee. They'd had him on campus for a visit. And he was a guy that I think was good enough to potentially be a weekend starter. But they'll find a bullpen arm there. And then I think catcher, it's kind of, you're monitoring. If you can find an upgrade, you're attacking it, and you're finding an upgrade. And maybe you take a guy take a guy anyway. You probably do, honestly, because I don't think you want Charlie Taylor as your backup again. But I would just say I don't think it's a guarantee that it'll get somebody.
So there's a chance they open next year with Cal Stark as the starting catcher.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be targeting and trying to find somebody else, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion they're going to find somebody better. And see, this is where I think there's just a disconnect between you and me on the Cal Stark situation. The bat's not great, but it's a catcher. Like, if Tennessee's better around him, you live with it. And I think Cal Stark, while he is limited, I think did a very good job of being aware of those limitations and knowing what he needed to do to get on base, which was to walk or get hit by a pitch. And he did that pretty he did that pretty frequently.
He actually had some really good at-bats late in the year too.
He did.
He did try. Yeah.
He understood his limitations.
Yeah.
So,
he was like, I'm getting 12 pitches out of this pitcher. I don't care if I end up striking out, I'm getting 12.
And if to your point, if Christian Scott's not an automatic strikeout right in front of him, and Tennessee's lineup leaves a lot to be desired around him.
That was the combination. When we put them together, it's like, okay, you get any rally, it's like Zane, you might as well just go back to the home plate. Like, you might just go, like, what was the point? Like, if you're batting seventh and you get on for Tennessee, it was just like, and there's an out, you're like, what am I doing here? What's the point of me being on base right now?
Yes. So to me, that's where, I agree with that. And to me, that's what made the Cal Stark hitting limitations feel bad. I mean, he's a catcher. Like, Connor Pavoloni, don't get me wrong, fantastic player. Way better than what Tennessee's had at catcher the last 2 years. He had some awful stretches hitting. Some terrible. And I'll go back to his freshman year, 2019. And 2020, even before the season got canceled, he wasn't good hitting. He was like a 240 guy. And
maybe it's an Evan Russell situation where we all were spoiled by how good Evan Russell was.
Yes, I think that's it, which was all right, that's, it's a left fielder playing catcher, and you felt and it wasn't all Evan Russell's fault because of what you talked about. Tennessee's starting pitchers in particular are just so slow going to the plate. They don't give catchers much of a chance to throw runners out, and Cal Stark was able to overturn that, or that's probably not the right word, but overcome that and throw out a lot of guys and throw behind guys to keep dudes honest on the base paths. So sure, Tennessee's going to go out and they're going to look for a catcher, and there's a chance they'll find and land someone better that will start. But even if they do that, unless they just get some stud, and to me, I haven't seen a catcher in the portal to date that's just a stud, it's going to be Cal Stark at least starting one game on the weekends and the other guy starting two. So I don't think you've seen all you're going to see from Cal Stark in a Tennessee uniform. His role may be diminished some, but it's not like he's going to be, they're going to just upgrade and he's going to be a nobody who you only see on Tuesday nights.
Well, there you go. Final thing on Tennessee baseball, and then we'll move to football real quick here, Ryan. Predicting the 2024 lineup for Tennessee 1 through 9. What does it look like to you?
Yeah, that's really hard to do.
Let's start left field and go. Ready? Left field. Who is in left field for Tennessee? Is it we'll do this. Transfer, in-house guy that you can name, or true freshman coming in?
Returning guy, I think it'll be Dylan Dreiling in left field.
Okay.
Hunter Inslee
center
in
field.
Center.
Okay.
Hunter Inslee.
Right field.
Right field. This is a hard one. I'll say Reese Chapman.
Ooh.
Returning freshman this year, didn't play a ton.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So no tears. Is it
well,
tears or tears?
I got him tears. I got him at DH. He's my DH pick.
Okay. There you go. DH. Third
yeah,
base.
and he'll be, to me, I'm very confident he'll be in the starting lineup, whether it's right field or at DH.
Okay. Third base.
Tears, Burke at first, Moore at second.
He's doing his own thing now. He's Ryan's doing his own thing. He's moving. He's taking over. Okay. Second base.
Second base, Christian Moore. Sorry.
Shortstop.
Transfer.
Okay. Third base.
Transfer.
Oh, so transfer on both sides of the left side of the infield. Cal Stark at catcher.
Right now. And Cal Stark at catcher.
And then the weekend rotation, are we going to go Friday, Saturday, Sunday? Weekend rotation.
Burns.
Friday?
AJ Russ. Friday, Burns. I think that's how they smooth some things over with him.
Ooh.
AJ Russell Saturday or transfer Saturday. And Drew Beam is plenty good enough to be a Saturday starter. Heck, it's plenty good enough to be a Friday starter. But I just think they'll keep the vibes the same. And especially if they don't have an issue finding that second guy, if AJ Russell or someone else submits himself, I think they'll just keep him on Sunday. They like him in that role. So I'll say Drew Beam finishing out the weekend as he has the last 2 years.
Okay. There you go. That's a bow on the 2023 Tennessee baseball season. And it is now football time in Tennessee. We're like Trey Smith days away from the opening day kickoff here for Tennessee football. Ethan, Cory Robinson, going to be the DB coach after this season. He is brought on as an analyst here for Tennessee football. You see this, and it's like one of those things that just was like it was like a Friday news dump vibe where it just kind of popped up. It was kind of an under the radar. He's married. I think he has connections to Idris Farouk, right? In that school, Ryan, isn't that the school?
Yes, he's from the Baltimore area, and that's where he had a stint as I don't think he was a head coach. I'm not positive. The New Orleans Saints website profile of Cory Robinson didn't say if he was an assistant coach or a head coach there, but yes, he was. He had spent time at the high school that he was at. Now time with Alante Taylor with the New Orleans Saints and Bryce Thompson. Yeah, so I just feel like reading through the tea leaves that if you're Willie Martinez, one of two things, where it's like maybe he's just looking to retire. Like he's been doing this for a long time. Maybe he goes and like, I don't know, maybe that this is just it for him. Like we assume this is probably it for Rodney Gardner, right? After this, he probably retires whenever that he ever wants to do it. This feels like the last stop for Rodney Gardner. Maybe Willie Martinez went into this thinking this might be the last stop for him. I don't know, but when you look at this, does this not kind of look like Tennessee's got their, if things go awry in the secondary this year again, we have our in-house option who has recruiting ties, has NFL ties, and someone we can slide right in there to DB coach next year? I think it at least gives Josh Heupel a look at him, and I think I hadn't even thought about this before when we were talking about him. You just made a good point. And it's been more on the offensive side of the ball where it's Josh Heupel's guys, but he has promoted from within with the two coaching moves that he's made since his original staff. So I think that's an interesting point. And, yeah, I think, whether it be a retirement or, whether just the pressure's on, I think Martinez is recruited pretty well. Not fantastic, but pretty well. But obviously this does feel like somewhat of a make and break year in the secondary. There needs to be real signs of growth after it being okay in 2021, maybe even pretty bad in 2021, but only just pretty bad because you had Alontae Taylor and Theo Jackson who were legitimately good to horrible last season. And then, the big thing there is Willie Martinez is the only coach on the staff on the last year of his contract. Everybody else has gotten the contract extension. So that felt kind of like monitor, that before. This is interesting. And then to bring Cory Robinson in who, I think basically stepped away from the Saints. I don't think he was even fired. Now, maybe it could have been a mutual parting of ways or something, and the language just made it seem like he stepped away. But it's interesting for sure, and it certainly is a very someone that if Cory Robinson had spent another year with the Saints and Tennessee, Willie Martinez retired at the end of this year, and Tennessee hired him, you wouldn't bat an eye at that hire thinking it's a strange one. So to me, it is certainly very interesting, and it wouldn't be surprising if things end up going down that path.
Ethan, are you optimistic that the secondary is going to be better this year? Are you on the optimistic train that things could be better this year?
I mean, you'd certainly hope so. I mean, from what were they, 12th, 13th in the SEC last season, pass defense?
They weren't Texas A&M in the secondary, I'll say that.
Yeah.
They were 12th in the SEC, but 7th from the bottom in the entire country.
Yeah. Ooh. There's no way to sugarcoat that, is there? You would certainly hope. You would certainly hope that Tennessee would be a little bit better. From what I've seen from practice is a lot of the newer guys, Conyer, Matthews, and Gibson, I believe. A lot of the newer guys are getting some run, which I think is a good thing. You say if you've got a not a huge defensive back class in 2022, I believe all three of the guys I just named are higher ranked than the highest ranked cornerback / safety that was in the 2022 class. I think I could be wrong on that, but D. Williams obviously is who I'm talking about. And so to have all those guys, you got to switch some stuff around at some point. If you're finishing near 7th from the bottom in the entire nation in pass defense, you got to turn something around. And so see those guys getting some run is good. To see hopefully some growth from some people here in the past that are finishing at this defense that's not doing too hot. You would think you can find a certain group of guys, and I'm not 100% sure how Andre Turrentine is doing. I'm not 100% sure how or what kind of rotations are being worked on in camp, but there's enough dudes in the secondary. I think we talked about this a couple months ago, actually. If you can't find something from, the returners, the type of not talent, but just the sheer volume of people that Tennessee has returning. I originally, when you guys had brought up the Willie Martinez thing, I hadn't realized that this was the last year of his contract. When Ryan said that, it kind of clicked for me. I was like, oh, that's why we're talking about this Cory Robinson as a potential replacement, because, you have the defenses as not at the secondary anyway, as not solid as it was. And then you have him entering his last year. It just makes a lot of sense, especially from where Tennessee has been hiring, in the program to replace the guys that are kind of on the way out. And I mean, the secondary, it's been the problem for a couple years now. Not the problem, but it has been part of the problem for a couple years now. And you need to start addressing that. It's nice to see, I guess, that yes, Martinez has been recruiting well, and you have these guys in here, but it feels like a kind of situation where you need to put up or shut up. Like if Tennessee's still finishing down at the bottom there, Heupel's got to address it. And that, I'd say, Chase, that you're right, Chase and Ryan, you're right, that it certainly seems that, Robinson would be the replacement there.
And it's also it's kind of nice that you just have these two dichotomies, right? Where clearly Heupel's like, Banks, whatever you want to do on the side of the ball. And there's someone in the administration somewhere who's like, hey, Rodney Gardner, like you need some SEC ties. You need, especially on defensive line, like Rodney Gardner's got the tie. Like you cannot, like you need those kind of ace recruiters on that side of the ball. And Brian Jean-Marie, I think, he's probably the most underrated staffer in my estimation. I think the linebackers this year are going to be great. And looking at who they're bringing in recruiting in the portal, I think Brian Jean-Marie's done a great job. And Eckler too. I think it's probably a combination there that they're ace recruiters and are pretty solid down the mat. But I just look at this secondary and I'm like, I think it's going to suck again. I think the only way it doesn't is if some edge guys pop. I think that's what they have to do, where if Tennessee is getting more pressure, if Roman Harrison has a great final year, if Joshua Josephs, Tyree West, and company, Bryson Eason, they become this disruptive force. Like the Tennessee defensive line is actually solid and they are able to get home a lot more than what we saw. Like Tyler Barron has a breakout year, who's been solid, but hasn't been like a star on the edge. Like if those things happen, then you can sell me on, okay, we can take some strides there. I think we're still a year away from that though. I still think you get a year of Chindavian Bradley and all these other dudes in the David Hobbs.
Agree.
Yeah, like that's next year is when I'm like, all right, I could see it more. There's just talent everywhere in the defensive line and the linebacker room that I could see it. And like a year from now, it might be Jordan Matthews on one side, Ricky Gibson on the other, Christian Conyer on this. Like there's just more, I'm sure, with some transfers littered in there. I just look at it and I just think that we're like phasing out the last group of just, they're trying their best. It sounds so dismissive, but it's just not like Tamari McDonald, Warren Burrell, Wesley Walker, Jalen McCullough, Kamal Haddon. You just look at this, like it might be Brandon Turnage. I think Deshaun Rucker. It's going to be a lot of vets, and I don't think we're going to see a lot of the guys that are pretty fat, like long-term, more fascinating and more upside for this Tennessee group and where they go in the next level. I don't see it. I think they're going to play a lot of vets, and I think a lot of these guys are still going to be in the rotation. And I think, barring injury, I think we're in for another rough secondary year from this group. And I don't know what that means for Willie Martinez going into next year, but I don't see it.
I'd agree with that. Overall, I think there's potential for him to be better at corner. Like I like even some of those pieces, Haddon, who obviously was infuriating. Like I think he has talent, and there's the younger guys there where it's like, okay, I could see Gabe Judy Lawley they bring in from BYU. Like there's guys I can see them being better. Now I don't think they're gonna be great by any means. Safety, I don't see it. I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful here, but if they're trotting Jalen Nicole out there, you're not going to be any better safety. To me, that's just a reality. I don't get why Wesley Walker didn't play over him last year, to be honest with you. That's just my reality. And you're right. I think the two things that are interesting, Martinez, I completely agree with your point. Martinez always seems to side with the veterans. He's going to go with the guys who aren't going to have the breaks and may be more, not as high ceiling. If, he doesn't want to retire and he wants to be back at Tennessee. And obviously, it's clear to us that the pressure's on him. That is the reality. It's clear to us, then I'm sure it's clear to him. Does he bend on that a little bit and play so many younger, more talented guys? I don't know. And then I just think you hit the nail on the head with the most, and I said this last year too, the most realistic path to Tennessee's pass defense being better is the pass rush to be better. Like that's what, to me, changes it. Be able to get home with 4 because they really, unless Byron Young was facing an offensive tackle that was just so much less athletic than him, they didn't do that last year, which was what Kentucky and LSU. He just physically abused dudes that he was way more athletic than. Other than that, he wasn't able to get consistent pressure. But again, to your point, it feels like you're a year away. Like the guys that you have in that room that you were really high on and are really talented and big time recruits, they're sophomores and freshmen. It feels like once you get those guys to being juniors and sophomores, you have a little bit more. And then you bring in another freshman class, I think what you're going to, and solid guys along the defensive line. Then it's like, okay, you got the depth and you can see these guys kind of taking a step forward, but it just feels a little early to think that's going to happen this season.
I agree. Jack Foster, friend of the pod, wrote a piece on where the Vols wide receiver group ranks in terms of the SEC. Ethan, when you look at the Vols wide receiver room and what it's going to look like with their 4-headed monster here, where do they rank? Are they the best? Do you have them above A&M? Do you have them above Georgia? Do you have them below? Where do the Vols fall in that regard right now?
I kind of agree with Jack. but with one exception. I think people are a lot higher on LSU because of Malik Neighbors and Malik Neighbors alone. Outside of Malik Neighbors, man, I mean, you got Brian Thomas Jr., who's, 5 touchdowns in 2022. I think he was like 350 receiving yards. I mean, that was their second leading receivers, 300. Squirrel White in his freshman season had more than that. So me personally, if I had to rank, I'd go Georgia, Tennessee, LSU, Texas A&M, and I'd think about putting Texas A&M over LSU too, just because I value more guys rather than, I guess, firepower. And I think Jack was basing it on Malik Neighbors just being, I mean, he's the best wide receiver in the SEC, probably. That's you have to. Well, I mean, he's up there. He's at least top 3. Probably there with Dominic Lovett, and then Brew McCoy, I'd say, is the other one that you have to be thinking about. But Neighbors is really good. Georgia's the obvious number 1. I mean, you got Rara Thomas, you got Dominic Lovett from Mizzou, who is hilariously underused at Missouri. Hilariously underused. I mean, Luther Burden was as well, but I mean, that's a topic for another time. And then you got Ladd McConkey coming back. So Georgia should be the number 1 answer for just about everybody, in my opinion. After that, you can talk about 4 teams, really. I mean, you could talk about Alabama if you want to. I don't think they're on the same level as A&M, LSU, and Tennessee. And if you're talking passing attack, I'm not sure who's going to throw the ball to Muhammad, Stewart, and Smith over at Texas A&M between Weigman and who's that other guy they got there? Whoever, doesn't matter.
Moose Muhammad. It's funny you say that because, I think it's A&M for me. I think A&M is my number 1.
Really?
Like, if everything goes right, I think they have the most talent of anyone. If I had to go, Evan Stewart, Ainias Smith.
Ainias Smith is coming off an injured knee, though.
But that's what I'm saying. The upside wise, if I just go, who is the most talented foursome potentially in the SEC? I think it's A&M. If everything goes right, I think A&M has the 4 best receiving options in the conference.
I will say, I think they're more proven than Tennessee. I think I'm going to go ahead and put A&M at 3rd, to be honest. I'm thinking about it. A&M is better than LSU. It's Tennessee, A&M, and Georgia.
I would agree. I'm willing to debate those top 3. Somewhere, if you have a different top 3, I think those are the clear top 3.
I wouldn't hate A&M over Tennessee simply because you have Brew McCoy in Tennessee's. That is 100% going to be good. Squirrel White, he's probably going to be pretty good. I mean, he had a very solid freshman season. Outside of that, Ramel Keaton's been solid, but
Ramel Keaton's great. You know what I'm okay with saying? Ramel Keaton's awesome. I don't know why people are just what Ramel Keaton is awesome.
I wasn't getting ready to crap on Ramel Keaton. I was about to say, do I think he is better than? I mean, who's number 3 on A&M right now?
Stewart. Yeah,
Stewart. Maybe Muhammad.
Noah Thomas.
I think you could go anyway between Tennessee and Texas A&M. The more I'm talking myself into it, I think you could go anyway. No one's beaten Georgia's. I don't care who's throwing them the ball. Ladd McConkey, Rara Thomas, and Dominic Lovett is a disgusting top 3.
I don't know. Georgia's a wait and see for me. I don't know. I don't know. We haven't seen it. When have we seen the Georgia receiver room just lit it up all across the board? When have we really seen it?
I wouldn't say it's Georgia's wide receiver room that's been the catalyst for their 2 back-to-back national titles, but I mean this season it's
here. I have a take. Brock Bowers, Lucky Lawson, or Lawson Lucky, and Oscar Delp are the stars of Georgia's offense. They're a tight end centric offense. They're 2 tight end sets all the time. Yeah, I don't know. I just can't put Georgia at number 1. I don't think they'll. I just don't have it.
I think one, for me, I would have. Because I think with all these teams we're talking about, we haven't seen a ton of dudes prove it on that team. I guess Georgia's got proven dudes, but they haven't done it in Georgia's offense. Yeah. So to me, it's a lot of projecting here. I think, I kind of see it as 2 classes at the top. I think the top class is A&M, the one Tennessee, Georgia, what y'all just said, and then behind them is LSU, Missouri, and Alabama. I think I don't know if Tennessee's got the 4 most talented receivers or 4 best receivers, but I would say this. If we're going to sit here at the end of the year and we're going to talk about production and we're going to talk about, everything that you talk about when you're looking at who's an all-SEC receiver, it's hard for me not to pick Tennessee just because, I have question marks about Joe Milton, but I don't have question marks about Josh Heupel's offense. I feel pretty darn confident some dudes are going to put up big numbers. Georgia, their offense is great. I can't say with any confidence that more than one, if even one of those receivers, I can't say with any confidence that a single Georgia receiver is going to have 750 yards next year. I'd be pretty darn surprised if Tennessee doesn't have two dudes that have 750, and I'd be pretty darn surprised if they don't have someone that has 1,000. And A&M, a lot of talent there. I tend to think, they're going to be a lot better offensively and pretty good offensively, and they're going to be, I don't know if it's a prize team, but certainly a lot better than they were last year. But you can't tell me you're betting on Texas A&M's offense over you're betting on Tennessee's offense. So
yeah, are we talking just straight up talent in the room, or are we talking passing attacks? Because if we're talking passing attacks, I'd go Tennessee first as well.
I'm saying
but
talent.
I think that's a completely different question, because I'd put Texas A&M at like 5th if that's how.
But see, I wouldn't even do that. By Petrino, if he gets full control, I still think.
I mean, maybe, but you still have Connor Weigman under center.
He might be good.
I mean, maybe, but I don't necessarily think he'll have year one under Bobby Petrino and Connor Weigman with a solid, passing attack. Oh, I mean, we have to remember Texas A&M, brother. Last year they were rough offensively.
Toss it out. If Bobby Petrino you got to toss it, Ethan.
Offense.
You got to toss it. You got to wipe it from your brain.
I get it's a completely different, but you still got the same dudes under center, and they're not. I don't know.
We'll see. I don't know. I think it's a fun conversation. It's also one where it's like, I think Tennessee year over year is always going to be in this conversation. They're going to be somewhere in the top 3. They're recruiting well. They develop well. They'll be. Would
your question be passing attack or just talent in the wide receiver room? Because that does vastly change my answer.
Talent
in the wide receiver room. I would say Georgia, toss up between Tennessee and Texas A&M, and then LSU further back.
Okay. Final thing here, we got Tennessee big recruiting weekend. They land Jordan Burns out of the home state, Pace Academy linebacker. So one of the two, it looks like, is already in the boat. Tylen Singleton coming in this weekend from Louisiana. Boo Carter is landed over the weekend on Saturday night in New York City. Safety, he's in the boat here. We'll see what that means for the Mike Matthews, who will also be here this weekend, the Ryan Wingos of the world. And then Max Anderson, another inside lineman, commits to the Vols, another 4-star. So 3 4-stars commit to Tennessee. They're now top 10 in every preferred just prospect ranking, whether it's on 3, 247 rows, whoever. They're in the top 10. Ryan, what do you make of the 3 big commits, and who do you think will end up being the biggest of this 3?
It's Boo Carter, and it's not close. It's not even either two good gets. Don't get me wrong. Jordan Burns, Max Anderson, good gets. Not even on the same level of Boo Carter. I mean, we talked about it on here the last 2 weeks, really both. I think this is a guy Tennessee has basically been their number 1 in-state target for 2 years now. Is a guy they had to get, and I think he's the best prospect of them. I think it's the biggest recruiting win of them when you're talking about who they're going up against and kind of how dicey it seemingly got there towards the end. And I think you look at, you kind of just hinted at it, I guess, with the Mike Matthews thing coming up. Like, he's really close to a lot of top prospects in this class. So I think in a lot of different ways, he's going to have a big effect. And, we just talking about Tennessee secondary and how they need to upgrade the talent there. Here's another guy that would do that. So Burns, Anderson, nice pieces. We talked about offensive line, but that's all been about offensive tackle. And Anderson, all signs point to him being an interior guy. Burns, solid piece. I don't even think will be the linchpin of Tennessee's linebacker class. To me, it's Boo Carter by a pretty big long shot.
I tend to agree there, Ethan. Do you think? Because I think it's really just Boo or Max Anderson. But the thing I will throw out with Max, he seems like he's close, and the reporting is that he's close with Bennett Warren, the offensive tackle who will be in this weekend for Tennessee. And I don't know if you guys have heard this or not, but Tennessee has not landed a elite.
Have we talked about that on this podcast before?
I don't know have you heard this? Have you seen this? Have you heard about this? Tennessee might not be landing a premier elite offensive tackle on the recruiting trail in the last 2 years. So that might be the biggest thing. It's like the thing with Max Anderson is like, if he's able to get Bennett Warren in the boat as like just get him in there. I think he jumps the, like, I don't know. Maybe that's the thing is like, everything's relationships and recruiting, like Boo Carter being close to Mike Matthews and then Max Anderson being close to Bennett Warren. That might be something that's even out of Tennessee's hands. That might be the biggest part of this 2024 class is those kind of friendships. What do you think, Ethan?
You guys just combined to say exactly what I was going to say. I mean, Boo Carter's the number one. I feel like people have assumed he was going to be committed to Tennessee for like a year now. And it's good, I guess, just to affirm that, to get him. I'd agree with everything Ryan said there. I would say Max Anderson's a big get because it's Tennessee's highest rated offensive line. And regardless of if he plays interior or on the tackle, he's Tennessee's best offensive line recruit of so far of the 2024 cycle. Now, I didn't know that, Chase, about Bennett. I just didn't know, I guess, that he has ties there. But
I'm a real sicko on Twitter.com and searching and keeping up with this stuff.
I will not admit to having known Max Anderson's, I guess, the people that he has ties to. It's good in any way to get momentum in that way, shape, or form with an offensive lineman committing. I think the only other guy – did Tennessee only have one other offensive line recruit? I'm looking right now. Was Gage?
No, it's
Genther?
Gage, Jesse Perry, and Gage Genther. Okay. So I think this is 3, right?
So, I mean, but just getting guys in the trenches, that's where the game is won, man. That's that you got to, like we've been talking about all day. You got to get guys in the trenches. So I'd say Max Anderson's important. Jordan Burns, I'd agree. Important gets, all 3 of them. Boo Carter's the guy that I'm most excited about because it's kind of like I went back and I'm kind of rambling here, but it's affirming what you had already had laid out, that Boo Carter was going to be the guy to commit, and he's got all these ties and all that, and he's just a freak athlete, of course, too. I mean, an in-state guy that you're able to keep in the state, able to still have the pipeline to come to Tennessee. It's good all around. Good recruiting weekend all around. I mean, all 3 of them huge gets, like I said, but yeah, Carter, Anderson, and then Burns would be my ranking of those 3.
There you go. Ryan Schumpert, what can the good folks check out from you and the team at Rocky Top Insider this week?
Yeah, so we'll have some NBA draft coverage tonight on whatever happens with Julian Phillips. But obviously, kind of as we enter this dead type of year, or not really dead, but quieter time of year, plenty of Tennessee baseball stuff on the offseason. I got the transfer portal tracker live later today, planning to have it on a piece kind of on what we talked about on what are the needs for Tennessee in the transfer portal, where should you expect them to target. So those stuff, and then you said it's football time in Tennessee, so we'll have plenty of Tennessee football coverage, and that will just be more and more and more as we go on throughout the offseason and get into July, and then obviously early August, fall camp starts, and it's full speed again.
There you go. Ethan, what about you and the team over at Saturday Down South this week?
Yeah, so we'll be covering, obviously, the College World Series. Florida's there already. LSU hoping to make it there. It could be an all-SEC thing. That's good for Saturday Down South, obviously. Have full coverage there. We'll have coverage of the drafts, SEC, Big Ten, Pac-12, and ACC guys that go in the draft. We'll have coverage there. And just moving into July, I guess it's kind of a down area for us, for SDS in general, so we'll have a lot of pieces previewing football moving forward as we move into SEC Media Days, as we move into just general media days for the 4 sites that we cover. And then obviously football recruiting is kind of ramping up right now for the 2024 and 25 classes. So got stuff on the news desk, got global columns coming out all the time. So Saturday Down South, SaturdayDownSouth.com, Tradition, Out West, and then Saturday Road.
There you go. Ryan, Ethan, thank you as always. And I will talk to y'all next week.
Well done, nephew. Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.